Imagine you're foreign to a country, foreign to the people around you, foreign to the language, and foreign to the laughters. How would you feel not being able to decipher what people are saying or what people are doing, being excluded from the conversation and being excluded from the narrative? Hi, my name is Faye, and today I'll be talking about English Service Project, and I'm from the International School of Bangkok. So, just to briefly describe what our club does, English Service Project, as the name suggests, is a service club that directly teaches the support staff at school. So, what is ESP? So we started in 2015, and we had initially only taught the guards at ISB. And then 2016, we continued with that. However, in 2017, we expanded ESP to the buildings and ground staff, the B&G staff. And then in 2018, we expanded our club to the Monterey bus staff, which are the bus monitors and bus drivers. And eventually, in 2019, um, we also continued doing it until 2020. And due to COVID restrictions, the ISB guards aren't able to join our lessons anymore because they are on duty. We also had plans initially to expand ESP to the Environmental Wilderness Campus, which is like an um, extension campus of ISB, basically. So let's get into kind of the mission statements. So first of all, our mission statement number one is to develop positive relationships within the community and to provide job-specific language instructions for ISB support staff. And finally, to strengthen basic English language skills for EAL adult learners. So the reason why I think that these positive relationships within the school community is so important is because oftentimes we underappreciate these support staffs at school, and you don't really notice how important their work is to the maintenance of the school. And so because of this, our club does a very good um, our club basically bridges the gap between the support staff and the student body at school. And secondly, by job specific language instruction, what we mean by that is because we teach different support staff groups, we create lessons that are specific to each of the groups. So, for instance, if I were to teach the guards, I would teach them directions, or I would teach them English phrases they could use to interact with students crossing the road, like be careful of the cars or wear your helmet. So this is what I mean by the second objective. And finally, most importantly, I'd say is the English language skills that they could apply in their daily lives and also to feel included. You know, it is about inclusivity. Service isn't just about helping people in rural or poor communities, but it's also looking to our own community and seeing how we can help enrich it and make it a better place. So, how to start an ESP? So, I actually wasn't the person who initiated this club. However, in 2018, if I go back to the timeline, 2015, so that was like what, 5 years ago. Um, yes, a student that has already graduated initiated this club, and it was not an easy process at all. She, alongside, I think, a group of friends and also my then advisor, had to really push this through the administrative barriers because there were quite a lot of just concerns, I guess, or just kind of, questions about how this would work, and especially how not only kind of the time that both the students and the support staff are free, but also the dynamics of these lessons and how they go. So let me get into how to really start the club. So first of all, I want to talk about the demands and logistics. So what I mean by that is obviously, as the title says itself, the number of adult students who are willing to learn and the number of students who are student teachers who are willing to teach. So I guess first of all, Just to establish the context, obviously ISB is in Thailand, and in Thailand, English isn't the native language, nor do people speak a lot of English. So I guess the demand for that context was not really a problem, since because they couldn't really speak English, these lessons would kind of provide them with these basic skills. And secondly is the number of student teachers who are willing to teach. So for my case, or I guess the students who started ESP, they were very passionate about this, and they really saw the importance. And I think Pim, if I remember her name correctly, who started ESP alongside her friends, as well as our then advisor, really had to push through the administration and had to go through that kind of process in order for this to happen. And it's not only just, passion and everything, but they did a lot of communication with the heads of departments. So I'm talking like the people responsible of the guards, people in charge of the buildings and ground staff, and etc. So those kind of logistics as well. And moving on to the second factor would be the locations and time. So the locations, for our case, we had the classrooms be in our English quad. So that's where all our English classrooms are predominantly at. So that was easier because everything was in the same place. However, if possible, I would recommend these locations to be close to where the support staffs work. Now, if there are many groups of support staff, that is going to be quite difficult, especially if your campus is pretty big. So locations, I think, it's important, but it's kind of yeah, it could work. And next would be the times. So for our case, we decided to do during school and during Panther blocks. And these Panther blocks are basically these time slots in the middle of the day that that is for like club meetings and everything. And even though they're only 30 minutes, I think that these lessons can actually be very efficient, and they have proved to be very efficient. And this is because it's very concise, and so you really capture the attention of these adult students without, having people kind of like being very tired after like an hour-long session. So I think this has been very helpful and effective in our case. Or we used to have after school sessions when we taught the guards because they were only free after school. So with the guards, we taught after school for also, again, 30 minutes because they were really on a time crunch, and they were kind of like learning between their breaks, which we really appreciate. But of course, now because of the COVID restrictions, we're not able to make that happen. And another possibility that we don't have are the weekends. And if you are committed, I mean, given this, again, the COVID circumstances, that would be pretty difficult. But if possible, I think the weekend would be quite an interesting possibility because both you and the support staff are free. And I think it's also a good use of your weekend too, and you could always also just bring your friends along, and it could be a very meaningful session. And finally, I alluded to this in the beginning, but it's very, very, very important, I reiterate, that there is a club advisor. And I don't know about like other schools, but for us, we always, always need a club advisor if you're going to initiate a club. So our then club advisor, helped tremendously with just so much of establishing the club, but also just maintaining it. And especially having her as our advisor, it was just so, so helpful because she cared so much about the club, and we would have frequent meetings about how we could improve, and she would consistently help us if anything was not really working. But of course, we took charge, but it was just kind of like the little things, like maybe if the students weren't showing up, or maybe there had to be some extra coordination that she could have helped. So I think a club advisor really helps a lot. And lastly would be coordinating with the heads of departments, right? So kind of the people in charge of the support staff group that you want to teach. So after I've kind of talked about how to start ESP, I'll move on to how to maintain the club. So in terms of club maintenance, we kind of split the lessons to, or our meetings to, kind of two halves. The first half being the planning of the lessons. So the planning of the lessons, basically we have this Google spreadsheet where we established like a syllabus at the beginning of the year, what lessons we want to teach. And then we have our members link the slides that they make themselves onto the Google Sheets. So as you can see here, we have like each kind of groups that we teach. And yes, of course, the other half would be the teaching of the lessons itself. So this is an example slide. I don't know if I can access this. Technical difficulties. Let me just. Yes, I don't know why, but I can't access it, but it's okay. So, oh, okay, never mind, I can now. So I'll show you this example slide here, which basically what we want to kind of emphasize in terms of making these lessons and presentations for the support staff is minimalism and repetition, because repetition isn't always redundant, especially when it's your first language. Repetition can be very, very helpful. So this is about basic greetings, and I tried to incorporate emojis to make it very visually appealing. So as you can see, there's also patterns that we try to incorporate into our slides too. It's like, I'm good, I'm not feeling well, I'm great, I'm tired. So these are kind of very clear indicators or just sentence patterns for to make it easier for these adult learners to learn, because it's really difficult. I mean, most of us, I'd say, have learned English since we were like very, very young, like maybe even some of us our first language, right? So for them it's very difficult, and I think you also need that understanding. It's like if I'm trying to learn Mandarin, which I used to learn until I dropped it, but if I were to learn it again, I would not be able to take in so much content. I prefer the minimalism and these just patterns to help me. So that is with the slides. And okay, this is, yeah, so these are basic phrases, greetings, whatever you'd call it. Good morning, blah, blah, blah. Good afternoon, blah, blah, blah. Good evening, blah, blah, blah. And yes, here are the patterns again. It was good. It was not good. It was tiring. It was fun. So it's very clear here. So sometimes, like, I would ask a question to the adult students in my class, and they would answer back with kind of the sentence patterns, and they could even replace words, right? Instead of this good, not good, tiring, fun. So that is not only keeping it simple, but also being able to incorporate even more words when you have these pattern structures. Where are you from? I am from Thailand. I am from America, blah, blah. Yeah, and what did you have? I had eggs for breakfast. And you could replace the word eggs, right? You could say, I had cereal for breakfast, or I had salmon for dinner. So you could always just makeshift everything. So that's what I like about this simplistic kind of presentation style. And also notice how all my slides are very minimalistic, and we do not want to be adding, so I wouldn't say more than 5 bullets per slide, because that just keeps people's attention. Yeah, so also we have translations here, which is really useful. So see you later, take care. So yeah, and of course conversation time, where we try to integrate this just the last, I'd say, 5 minutes or so, where we have students, so us, like the teacher students, teach English to, yeah, so not teach, sorry, talk in English, um, discuss, and having conversations. Okay. So okay, moving on to the teaching. So number one, Engagement, of course, this is very obvious, but engagement is super important. When we teach, we never have phones or any other electronic devices on the table, or we try not to at all, of course, except for computers, because it diverts the attention away from what they're trying to teach. So that is something I feel is very, very important. And I also think that when teaching, not necessarily do you have to be do you have to be able to speak their language or the language of the native support staff, right? I mean, so we have a fellow officer. So she is in Thai and she doesn't speak Thai, but she still can teach the support staff, and she does so pretty brilliantly because she fully engages and stays committed. And through like visible and like physical cues, and using hand gestures and motions and drawing things out and writing things out. And sometimes I'd say it's even better if you can't speak the native language, because you're able to kind of challenge them, because when you're Thai, or like me, I it's so easy for me to like speak in Thai to help them, to support them, and all of that. But sometimes you do need that little push where, you know, um, just for you to get your feet wet. and yes, that's kind of on full engagement and taking initiative. So we always have like a lead teacher leading our lessons, whilst the students, like other members, kind of teach and group up with the staff, like you see here um, on the tables, right? So sometimes we usually have 5 officers, and each officer is in charge of each of the rooms or each of the support staff groups. But sometimes, right, when the officers aren't here, whether they have like mandatory meetings or whatnot, or they're sick, whatever, we really expect for the members to step up and to participate too. So taking initiative, in my opinion, is something very, very important. And maybe it's, especially in Thai culture or in many Asian cultures, it's kind of that weird dynamic between, the older person is supposed to be the one teaching and giving you knowledge, whatever, and the younger person is supposed to be the one receiving and, listening. But then again, like, it can be switched. And I don't think this is this is something that it's like, oh, it's, we know English, like we know the most, we're just going to teach you and all of that. But I think it's also the idea of reciprocal learning, because even though, yes, I am teaching English to the support staff, I am also learning about them, learning about what they do for their jobs and their daily lives, and learning about them as a person, which I feel is that part of reciprocal learning. So coming back to initiative, taking initiative is very, very important. And it can also help you in different other areas as well. Next is commitment. So we hear commitment a lot, whether that's through sports, the arts, literally anything. So commitment, why is commitment important? Well, commitment is very, very important especially in service, because imagine your teacher. Okay, imagine, I don't know what you take, but I take bio. So of course I have the same teacher coming to teach me every other day, or every bio class basically. But imagine your teacher switches every time you come learn. you know I would feel very disrupted in my learning. I would not like that. Sometimes, like, my teachers are on sick leave or aren't able to come and teach. I feel like, oh, like it, like, I don't really like that. Of course I can't force the situation, but I'm saying that, like, I would rather have the same teacher come teach me, because there's no discrepancy in the learning, and it's able to just flow and continue pretty smooth. So that's kind of the same thing when you're trying to teach the staff, right? If you come and you go, and, like, that sort of discrepancy that is created, it's not really good for the teaching or the learning. So commitment is very, very important in this case. And also it helps you, like, you learn more about these people, and there really isn't a reason for you not to come back. Next is enthusiasm. So enthusiasm is very, again, vital to just service in general, I'd say, because you can expect them to kind of, um, get as much out of it if you don't put as much in. The more you put in, the more you'll get out of it, and the more they can get out of it. So, enthusiasm really is key. And honestly, if I'm being very honest, I initially kind of found it difficult at times, right? Like, it was like, oh, like, why don't they understand it? Or, getting just a little frustrated about, like, oh, I don't know, just very little things. But then you realize just how much um, harder it is, right, for someone whose native language is not English and as an adult learning English. And that just takes a lot of courage too. So this enthusiasm in teaching also kind of creates this understanding and empathy for the support staff. And finally, I would say to just enjoy, because it's a time to just um what I kind of feel is that these people help you so much behind the scenes, whether that's the building and ground staff, just cleaning your classrooms, cleaning the bathrooms, cleaning whatever, and keeping everything just in place and organized, or whether that's the guards keeping you safe, right? Or the Montreal staff, in charge of the transportation. Um, they really are just vital to maintaining the school. And it's kind of like we are giving back to someone who is giving to us, if that makes sense. So again, that idea of reciprocity. And it is very enjoyable. I mean, it's easy for me to come here and just sit and talk and very monotonous and boring. But I think once you really get into it, the more you'll know about the value of just teaching and the value of interacting with these staff. And I was having a conversation with with a staff about just how their life is going and how they had to wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning to come to work and even, come to my lessons. And you just gain this whole new level of appreciation for them, because I complain about waking up at like 7 a.m. and they have to wake up at 2 a.m. and not only work, but also, come to school to attend their lessons too. So that is definitely a whole nother level of appreciation that I have gained. And okay, so the outcomes. I've talked so much about, kind of the logistics and everything, and how to teach and everything, but the outcomes um, to this. So the first one being leadership skills, which is pretty obvious, considering the fact that you have to just get up there and speak, and just talk in front of, the staff. For some people, it is a more nerve-wracking than others, but again, going back to the taking initiative point of mine, it's something you can carry on like even later, and I was a pretty shy person, I guess, like, yeah, in my freshman year, sophomore year, until I kind of started teaching, and I started to realize how fun it is to be able to help people, and to be able to extend my privileges to those who aren't able to afford the same opportunity as I can. So these leadership skills that I'm able to acquire from this is something that's very invaluable, in my opinion. Okay. Next is strategic thinking. So, what I mean by strategic thinking is how you're able to think on the spot, how you're able to improvise. Because let's be honest, like, even if you come prepared or not, there's always that room for improvis, improv, improvisation. Sorry, to improvise basically is what I'm trying to say. And so, an example of this, right, is um, sometimes when the slides like don't really not that they don't work, but they're just very incomplete. You kind of have to improvise on the spot. Or for instance, I try my best to make the lessons as interactive and as entertaining and engaging for the students so they don't, lose focus or they don't get bored easily. And how I do that is by role playing. So, what I mean by role playing is, for instance, right, if um, we're trying to teach, let's say, we're trying to teach prepositions to anyone. Okay, let's say the Montreal staff. So I would have um, a table in the middle and I would place an object that might be a water bottle, because a water bottle is something that students or kids just like to forget on buses, right? So I'd place it on the table, underneath the table, in front, behind, all those preposition vocabularies, and they're supposed to kind of guess from that. Or even more interactive games that involve them, which would be um, having kind of creating this like little like um scenario where we just build like a mini bus and we have um students like us sit on the bus and we basically kind of act out different scenarios where they have to use the phrases that they've learned, such as please put your seatbelt on, or please pick up the trash, or um, please lower your voice, all of this, right? So they have to use those phrases that we taught them and use it on us when we are kind of, like acting out those behaviors. So that is kind of an example of role playing that could be used in this scenario. Um, yeah, just to make it fun, to spice things up, and just not make things bland or boring. Next is respect and empathy, which I have alluded in the beginning, but I think these are very important skills that is often underlooked, I'd say. I think that to survive in this world, these are just the two factors that you need, period. Because I mean, I think that it's easy sometimes, coming from a place of privilege, for us to just be like, oh yeah, we know English, we can get our way, we have this good education, we can like um make our way through life and all of that. And it's easy to just think that, oh, we're so good, but then kind of look down on these people, whether you intentionally or unintentionally do so. So I think that coming to ESP has kind of taught me this respect that's reciprocated, and this empathy for these students, because they're trying their best and they try incredibly hard to learn English as an adult, one, and second of all, when it's completely new to them. And also to add on the fact that we are kids, and it does feel kind of culturally strange, especially in the context of Thailand. And so that dynamic might seem strange or weird at first, but essentially, I think it's that reciprocal respect, trust, and empathy that we are able to obtain, as we kind of go along. And I think this is the last one. Yes. The accomplishments. So the accomplishments from this, I would say that it's not really the materialistic or the external ones, but it's just like the intrinsic value of being able to feel so gratified, being so grateful after you teach these lessons, because they're very rewarding. And I never really realized or acknowledged how um how what's the right word, uh, how much energy you have to put forth in just not only speaking but also teaching, and putting your energy forth in creating meaningful lessons. And through this you're able to foster such meaningful relationships too. And it's not something that's very um you could find anywhere, right? So I feel like this, again, going back to all my points, is such a great way of giving back to the community. And not only that, but to give back to your community, to give back to the people who constantly gives to you. And so this is why ESP, in my opinion, should probably be implemented in every school, is because there's always going to be people in your community who unfortunately is less fortunate that you could help and be a part of that change. So why not try to do something that could help them, such as teaching? And on that note, I would like to conclude my presentation and thank you, everyone. Um, this, I would say some final comments, I'd say, before kind of in addition to the slides, is with the COVID restrictions. In the case of Thailand, fortunately, there hasn't been much sort of like basically the situation isn't that bad and it's actually pretty safe right now. So in terms of safety, we don't have any problems with that. However, there are still social distancing rules which we do adhere to, and because we're not able to teach the guards anymore, we have fewer students coming in, and so like we're able to distribute the people into more classrooms, and so there's less people, and we try to limit 10 people per class. So that's kind of on the COVID restrictions. And let me just think what else. Oh, and I guess finally, I just want to say that, um, as I said in the beginning, this is definitely not um, an easy process at all. And it did go through quite a few just administrative processes, and it was very, very long until it was built. And even when it was built, there was only one classroom, but now we've grown and been able to extend it to many, many classrooms. And also, actually, last year we had a GCW trip for ESP. So GCW basically is the equivalent of like a day trip or a residential trip that you go for a week. So we were able to have that trip for ESP, which I thought was pretty cool. And I had also initiated that because I just think it's so important for other people who wouldn't usually come to ESP to really experience what it's like. So yes, finally, I would like to conclude now. But before I go, I would just like to share my email, which is 20055, as you can see on the board, and my fellow officer's email, knitting19412. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us. And thank you again.